How do you stay calm when you see your own wife in a white gown at an engagement party you were never told about? Why did her family feel so safe cutting me out that they did it on a live stream under my real name while I sat 90 miles away? This is how one photo, one quiet lawyer, and a forgotten prenup turned their perfect night into the moment they all stopped laughing. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Mark. I am 42, and until a few weeks ago, I thought my life was very simple. I work in IT, I pay the bills on time, I cook on Sundays, and I try not to make trouble for anyone. People say I'm calm. Some say I'm boring. For a long time, I thought those were the same thing. That Friday morning started like many others. The coffee machine made its slow noise in the kitchen, the radio played low in the background, and my wife Lydia stood by the counter, scrolling on her phone with one hand while she ate dry cereal with the other. I watched her for a moment. She always looked bright and awake, even when I still felt half asleep. She liked bright colors, big earrings, and loud stories. I preferred quiet clothes and quiet days. She told me she had to go to Denver for the weekend for, in her words, a boring family reunion. She said it was just some extended relatives, a few people from out of town, nothing special. She said it would be awkward for me, and there were no plus ones this time anyway. She called it a family cleanup thing. She laughed when she said it, like it was a small, stupid event she had to survive. I asked her if she wanted me to drive her part of the way. I said I did not mind the trip, and I could bring my laptop and find a cafe to work in while she did her family events. She shook her head and said that would only make things more complicated with her Aunt Carol, because Carol was strict about invitations. She said I should just enjoy a quiet weekend, watch the game, sleep in, and not worry about family drama. I told her I understood. That was something I said a lot in our marriage. I understood when she said she was busy. I understood when she said her parents were a lot, and she did not want to mix circles. I understood when she said I was bad at small talk, and it made her nervous at her parents' parties. I was good at understanding, maybe too good. She moved around the kitchen like she was already late. She checked the time, checked her phone, checked her suitcase by the door. She mentioned that her aunt liked things perfect and on schedule. She said she did not want to give them another reason to talk. I knew that meant her family, and I knew it meant me too, even if she did not say it outright. I took her suitcase out to the car. In the back seat, I noticed a long garment bag folded carefully. I asked if it was something new for work. She smiled quickly and said it was just a nice dress for dinner because her aunt liked everyone dressed up even for boring reunions. She said I should not worry. It was nothing important. She kissed me on the cheek. It was a quick kiss, a practiced one. She thanked me for carrying the suitcase, told me not to live on frozen pizza while she was gone, and promised to call when she arrived. I stood in the driveway and watched her car disappear down the street. The sky was gray, the air felt cold, and I told myself this was normal. Married people did things apart sometimes. It was fine. I tried to treat the day like any other Friday. I answered emails. I fixed a server problem. My coworkers joked about weekend plans, and I gave the usual answer about doing nothing interesting. Jason, a younger guy in my team, told me he was going to the local sports bar that night to watch the game and asked if I wanted to join. I almost said no, but then I thought about the empty house. I said I would come for a while. During my lunch break, I checked my phone. No message from Lydia, but there was an automatic notification that her phone had arrived in Denver. We shared locations for safety. I saw the little dot in the city and felt strangely far away from it. I told myself she was probably busy with her aunt, and I did not want to bother her. When I got home after work, the house felt very quiet. No shoes by the door except mine, no loud music from the bedroom, no strong perfume in the air. I heated up some leftover pasta and ate it, standing at the counter. I realized how much of my life was built around being the calm space for someone else's storm. When the storm was gone, the space felt like nothing. Later, I drove to the sports bar to meet Jason. It was the usual kind of place, sticky floors, large TVs on every wall, loud people already shouting at teams that had not even started playing. Jason waved from a high table. He had a beer in front of him and already looked excited about the game. He asked where Lydia was. I said she was in Denver for a family reunion. He whistled and said that sounded more exciting than my weekend, then laughed. I laughed too, a little. I did not say she had told me it was boring. I did not say I was not invited. I just said she would be back Sunday. We watched the first part of the game. Jason talked a lot about work gossip, video games, and his on-again, off-again girlfriend. I nodded at the right times and made simple comments. I checked my phone a couple of times but told myself not to be clingy. Lydia always said she hated clingy. At some point, Jason grabbed his phone again and frowned. He said something like people posting live junk during games always messed up his feed. Then he stopped talking and his eyebrows went up. He looked at me, then back at the phone. He told me that this was weird. He said there was a live video from a Denver rooftop party trending in his feed. He said the caption called it the engagement of the year. He asked me if Lydia had mentioned any engagement in the family. I said no. Then I reached over and asked if I could see. He turned the phone toward me. The video was vertical, shaky at first, like someone was moving through a crowd. I heard music, clinking glasses, and the high, excited voice of a woman I recognized. It was Aunt Carol. I had heard that same tone when she called Lydia on speakerphone, talking fast about events and brands and image. She was saying how happy she was to host this special night in our beautiful city, how love always finds a way, how second chances are a gift. The camera stopped moving and focused on a small stage at the front of the rooftop. There were lights, flowers, and a big screen behind it. On the screen were the words, "She said yes," in giant letters. A man in a suit stood there with a microphone, and next to him stood a woman in a long, shining gown. It took my brain a second to accept what my eyes saw. The woman was Lydia. Her hair was done in a style I had never seen. Her makeup was heavier than usual. The dress was the expensive kind she used to show me in online shops before saying she could never justify buying it. She looked happy, bright, and completely at home under that light. She looked exactly like a woman at her own engagement party. The man beside her was not me. He was taller, with a perfect smile and the confident posture of someone used to being watched. I knew his face from old photos in Lydia's boxes and from one uncomfortable dinner long ago. That was Evan, the doctor she had dated before me. She had once told me that relationship had been too intense and dramatic. She had said I was the opposite, that I made her feel safe and calm. Now he was the one holding the microphone next to her on that stage. I stared at the screen. The sound of the bar around me went soft, like someone had turned it down. Jason said quietly that this did not look like any boring reunion he had been to. He added that he was sorry and asked if I had known. I said I had not known anything about this. On the video, Aunt Carol told the crowd to raise their glasses. People in expensive clothes lifted champagne flutes and smiled in that way people do when they know cameras are on them. Lydia looked at Evan, then back at the crowd. Evan said he was the luckiest man in the room and that he was grateful to her family for welcoming him back. He said it felt like fixing an old mistake. I noticed something else, small but sharp. On the big screen behind them, under the words, "She said yes," there was a slideshow of photos. Lydia in college, Lydia at holidays, Lydia traveling. I watched the images switch and realized that I was not in any of them. 10 years of marriage, and it was like someone had cut me out with scissors. Jason put a hand on my shoulder and said I did not have to stay. He looked uncomfortable, like he was seeing something private and ugly. I told him I was fine. My voice sounded almost normal, even to me. Inside my chest, something cold was spreading, but it was not loud. It was just clear. The live video continued. People clapped, confetti shot into the air. Aunt Carol moved the camera to show the guests. I recognized Lydia's parents at the front, smiling wide, Victor clapping like a proud king. I saw cousins, old friends, even some people I barely remembered from Lydia's stories. All of them were there. All of them were part of this family moment. I was at a bar 90 miles away, holding a cheap beer. I put Jason's phone down gently. I said I needed some air. I stepped outside into the parking lot. The night air was cool against my face. Cars came and went. The bar noise stayed behind the doors. I pulled out my own phone to see if I had missed any message from Lydia. There was nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no photos, just a silent screen. I opened social media and found the same live stream at the top of my feed, now with hundreds of comments. People were calling them a beautiful couple. Some comments joked about finally correcting history. I saw Aunt Carol's username at the top. As I watched the video freeze and jump, my phone buzzed in my hand again. A new notification appeared on the screen from the same app. It said that Aunt Carol had just posted a new photo from the party and had tagged me directly in the caption. My phone screen showed Aunt Carol's name and a wall of tiny glitter emojis under the notification. I tapped the new post. It was a wide shot of the ballroom from above. You could see the lights, the flowers, the stage, the crowd. In the center, Lydia and Evan stood holding hands. Her dress caught the light in a way that made it look almost white. The caption was long and excited. Carol wrote about love finding its way back, about fixing old mistakes, about being proud of her niece for choosing the life she always deserved. Then I saw my own name. She had tagged my profile at the end, calling me a chapter we don't talk about, and thanking me, in a twisted way, for keeping her steady until she could follow her heart again. I just stared at it. A bar patron bumped my shoulder as he walked past. I barely felt it. The bright icons under the photo told me people were liking and commenting in real time. My name sat there in front of hundreds of strangers, and suddenly I was not a husband anymore. I was a footnote, an example, a joke. I closed the app and leaned against my car. The metal was cold on my back. I tried to breathe slowly. Anger did not come like I expected. No sudden heat, no urge to throw my phone or smash something. There was just this heavy, dull feeling, like I was sinking in place. I thought about the first time I met Lydia. It had been at a friend's birthday party 10 years earlier. I was 32, already settling into the idea that maybe I would never meet anyone. She walked into that small bar with a loud laugh and a red dress, and the whole table turned to look at her. I was the quiet guy in the corner with a cheap beer, answering tech questions for everyone else. She sat beside me later and told me she was tired of loud men who needed attention. She said she liked that I listened more than I talked. She said it was relaxing to be with someone steady. When she leaned her head on my shoulder that night, I believed her. The early years were good. We did small things together. Cheap dinners, walks around the lake, Netflix on the old couch. She told me stories about her past with Evan, how he had been exciting but unreliable, how his big plans never matched his actions. She said she wanted safety now. She called me her calm place. Back then, the words felt like a gift. I met her parents for the first time at a Sunday lunch in their big house. Victor shook my hand and asked about my salary before he asked about my hobbies. He joked that at least Lydia had chosen someone who would never cheat because I looked like the kind who lived in server rooms. People laughed. I forced a smile. At that same lunch, Lydia's mom, Nora, asked if I had photos of us. When I pulled out my phone, she clicked past the ones of me and paused only on the ones of Lydia. She said her daughter always looked like a magazine cover. She said I was lucky. She did not say Lydia was lucky too. Little things like that kept happening. At birthdays and holidays, Victor would tell stories about Lydia's real social circle, and how I probably did not mind staying home with my computer. When they took group photos, they would sometimes ask for just family and motion me aside. Lydia would look at me with apologetic eyes and say it was just a tradition and not personal. I told myself they were old-fashioned, that they would warm up. Instead, they learned I would not push back, and they stopped even pretending to hide their habits. A few years into our marriage, Victor's marketing agency hit a bad period. He complained over dinner about cash flow and clients leaving. Lydia pulled me aside later that week and said her dad was in trouble, that everything he had built might fall apart. She looked truly scared. I checked our savings. I had always been careful with money. I suggested a loan contract, something simple. She said her father would be offended if we made it formal. She said he would pay it back soon anyway. She said it would mean a lot if I trusted her family. In the end, I wrote a check that cleared most of their debt. Victor shook my hand when I handed it to him and said he would never forget my support. Then he said, as a joke, that Lydia had finally found a use for marrying an IT guy. Everyone laughed. I joined in because I wanted to believe it was harmless. We did sign some paperwork later. Victor's lawyer insisted on something to keep the accountants happy. I remember sitting in a small office with Lydia and flipping through pages while she squeezed my knee and whispered that it was just routine. I signed where they pointed. I never really thought about those pages again. As time passed, Lydia's career in marketing grew. She became the people person in every room. She organized events, shook hands, and moved through crowds like she was in her element. I stayed in my lane. I fixed broken laptops for family members. I helped redesign Victor's network when it crashed. I replaced cables in Aunt Carol's condo and mounted her TV when she moved. Whenever there was work to do in the background, I was useful. Whenever there were photos to take, I was invisible. I remembered one Christmas at Aunt Carol's place. She had just finished remodeling her condo. I spent half the visit on a step stool, running cables and setting up her smart home system. While I worked, she gathered everyone else by the tree for family photos. I heard her call out names: Lydia, Victor, Nora, cousins, random partners. When I stepped down from the stool, red dust on my hands, it was over. Lydia told me later that she had asked them to include me, but her aunt had said it was just the core family. Lydia said I should not be sensitive. She said I knew they loved me in their own way. I nodded and told her I understood. Standing in the parking lot outside the bar now, years later, with my name tagged as a mistake in a public post, I saw the pattern clearly. They had never really seen me as part of them. I had been a service, a support beam, something useful until they could build the structure they actually wanted. My phone buzzed again. It was a message in the big extended family chat. I almost never wrote in it. Most of the time it was filled with memes, party invites, and photos from events I was not at. Now there was a fresh photo from the same Denver ballroom. It was a close-up of Lydia and Evan laughing, cheeks touching, confetti still falling around them. Under it, Aunt Carol had written that she was so proud of her niece for correcting past choices and finally joining the right family. Dozens of relatives responded with heart emojis and comments about how perfect they looked together. I scrolled up the chat. There were planning messages from the last month, all about the big night, about dress fittings, rehearsal dinners, surprise guests. My name did not appear once. No one had asked if I was coming. No one had told me not to come. They had built a whole second life around Lydia and simply assumed I would stay where they put me. In the background, a new message appeared from Victor. He wrote something about how Lydia had always been meant for bigger things, and how he was relieved she was finally moving into the world she belongs in. He said he was proud of her courage. He ended with a line about being grateful that she had grown beyond the limitations of her first marriage. I stared at that last phrase. First marriage. It made our 10 years sound like a bad starter car you trade in when you can afford the real one. I thought about the nights I drove Lydia to the hospital when she thought she had a panic attack, only to learn it was a heavy anxiety episode. I thought about sitting in hard chairs in emergency rooms, holding her hand. I thought about the time I worked overtime for 3 months straight so we could afford a trip she said would save our relationship. That was her first marriage in his eyes. A rough draft. Jason texted me asking if I needed anything. I typed that I was okay and thanked him. I did not trust my thumbs with more words than that. I sat in the car for a while, just listening to my own breathing. The live stream from Denver sat at the top of my app, waiting. I did not watch it again. When I finally drove home, the house felt different. I walked room to room, seeing every corner like it belonged to someone else. The couch where Lydia had cried when her first big campaign failed. The kitchen where I had cooked her birthday dinners. The hallway where we had once argued quietly because her parents did not approve of a trip I had planned. Our bedroom was neat, the bed still made from that morning. Her side of the closet was half empty now. I had not noticed how many clothes were gone until then. Maybe she had been moving things piece by piece. Maybe I had not wanted to see it. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember the last time she had looked at me the way she had looked at Evan on that stage. I could not find that moment. Maybe it had never looked exactly like that. Maybe I had been filling in the gaps with hope. My phone buzzed one more time. This time it was a private message from Lydia's cousin Mia. She wrote that she was sorry about how you found out, and that things had gotten more complicated than anyone meant. She asked if I was home and if she could talk to me in person the next day, somewhere quiet. I stared at her message. None of the others had reached out. Not her parents, not her aunt, not Lydia. Only a younger cousin who always looked a little uncomfortable at family dinners. I typed that we could meet at a small coffee shop in town. As I set my phone down on the nightstand, another notification blinked on the screen from the family chat. This time, it was a shared PDF from Aunt Carol with the guest list for the engagement weekend attached. Dozens of names lined up in black text. I scrolled slowly from top to bottom. Lydia's name, Evan's name, her parents, her aunt, cousins, old friends, event staff. Even some of the +1s were listed by first name. My own name was not there at all. I lay back on the bed, phone resting on my chest, and stared up at the ceiling. For years, I had been the one person who always said I understood. In that moment, I finally saw that they had taken that as permission to erase me. And somewhere in the middle of that heavy quiet, another thought slid in. Small but clear. They were very sure I would never do anything about it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I had not slept much. My mind kept replaying the video from the bar and the guest list on my phone. I kept seeing Lydia's smile, just not pointed at me. Sunlight came through the blinds and cut lines across the bedroom wall. Her side of the bed was empty and smooth. Her pillow still smelled like her shampoo. For a second, my brain tried to pretend she was just at a work trip and would text me soon. Then I remembered the dress, the stage, the champagne. The feeling passed. I showered, dressed, and made coffee like any other Saturday. My hands moved on habit. Mug, sugar, spoon. It felt strange, like I was acting in a play I did not believe in anymore. The house was too quiet. The fridge still had her favorite yogurt inside. The magnet from her aunt's place still held up an old photo on the door. In that picture, we were both smiling. I noticed it was one of the few where I was even in the frame. At 10, I got in the car and drove to the coffee shop where Mia wanted to meet. It was a small place on a side street, with old wooden tables and too many plants in the windows. We had been there once before with Lydia, years ago. Back then, Mia had seemed shy and sweet. Lydia had called her the nervous one in the family. Mia was already there when I walked in. She sat at a corner table, hands around a mug, eyes fixed on the door. When she saw me, she stood up too fast and almost knocked over her drink. She whispered my name and asked if I was okay. I said I was not sure, but I was here. Up close, she looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes, makeup slightly smudged, hair rushed into a bun. She wore a dress that looked like it belonged at a party, but over it she had thrown a simple cardigan, like she had escaped halfway through getting ready. We sat down. She twisted the edge of a napkin between her fingers. She apologized again for how I had found out. She said nobody had meant for me to see the live stream like that. I thought about how no one had meant to tell me anything at all and kept that in my mouth instead of in the air. She said the last few months had been a mess. Lydia had started visiting Denver more often. The family had started talking about options and corrections. At first, she thought it was just the usual gossip, that nothing would really change. Then she heard Victor speak at a dinner 2 weeks ago. He said Lydia was finally going to fix her life. I asked her how long they had been planning this. My voice sounded calm to my own ears. It surprised me. She looked down at her mug and said that the first time she heard Lydia mention Evan's name again was last spring. Lydia had told her that she and Evan had met at a conference by chance. After that, Lydia started referring to her marriage in the past tense when talking to some people. She joked that she was basically single in spirit. They all laughed. Mia told me that every time she tried to ask if I knew, Lydia brushed it off. She said I was too gentle for drama, and she wanted to handle things in a way that would not crush me. She kept saying she would sit down with me after everything was set. They acted like my feelings were a mess on the floor that they would clean up later. I asked Mia if anyone had ever said my name when they made plans for the engagement weekend. She shook her head slowly. She said Victor and Carol talked like I was already out of the picture. They used phrases like, when it's official, and when she's free again. Someone joked that I would probably sign whatever they put in front of me as long as it came with a soft explanation. I felt the words slide over me. I stayed very still. I did not know exactly when it happened, but in that moment, something inside me shifted. It was not like a door slamming. It was like a quiet switch flipped deep in the walls. The light in the room did not change. The sounds of the coffee shop did not change. But my place in this story did. Mia looked scared to meet my eyes. She said she knew about some of the money I had given Victor years ago. She had overheard him tell someone that he was grateful, but that in the end, we all know whose family Lydia really belongs to. He said that when the dust settled, I would walk away with what he came with, and that would be fair. I thought about the loan I had given, about the papers I had signed in that small office. I realized I did not actually remember the details. At the time, I had been more focused on Lydia's anxious face than on the words on the pages. I had trusted everyone in the room more than I had trusted myself. Mia leaned forward and said she did not agree with what they were doing. She said she would probably get in trouble for talking to me. She did not ask me to forgive Lydia or to be nice about it. She just wanted me to see that none of this was an accident. I thanked her. I meant it. She looked relieved when I did not yell, when I did not storm out or call anyone names. I told her I appreciated the truth. She nodded and said that was all she could give me. Before she left, she squeezed my hand once and said something that stuck in my mind. She said they all thought I would just let this happen because I hated conflict more than anything. After she walked out, I sat alone at the table, staring at the steam from my coffee. I thought about all the times that had been true. All the times I had chosen silence because it felt easier. All the times I had told Lydia's parents I understood, even when I did not. I finished my drink slowly, then drove home. The house greeted me with the same quiet. I walked straight to the bedroom and sat on Lydia's side of the bed. Her tablet was on the nightstand, plugged in. The screen lit up when I moved it. A line of notifications showed new photos from last night's party and a few unread messages. My hands shook a little as I picked it up. For 10 years, I had trusted that I did not need to look through her things. Right then, I decided that trust was already broken and I was just walking through the ruins. I opened the messaging app that she always used. A recent conversation sat at the top with a name and profile picture I knew all too well. Evan. The last messages were from earlier that morning, I read quietly. He thanked her for making everything worth the wait. He said he had always known she belonged beside him on a stage, not beside some guy who hides in offices. He wrote that soon she would be free and they could clean up the paperwork and repaint the old house, or maybe move into something bigger that fit their new status. She had replied with laughing emojis and told him not to worry, that Mark will sign off once he understands it's for the best. She wrote that I hated to see her unhappy and that I would not want to stand in the way of love. She called our marriage training wheels. There it was, clear, simple, in black text on a bright screen. Not a mistake, not a moment of confusion, a plan built on who they thought I was. I put the tablet down carefully. My chest did not feel like it was on fire. It felt like ice, thick and solid. I stood up and walked down the hall to the small door at the end, the one that led to the garage. The garage smelled like oil and cardboard and old paint. My car sat on one side. On the other side was my small workbench and an old metal filing cabinet. I had dragged that cabinet from apartment to apartment over the years. It held tax returns, car records, appliance manuals. And in the bottom drawer, behind the least important folders, there was a small, locked metal box. I pulled the drawer open. The box was still there, heavy and familiar. I had not opened it in years. I knew what was inside: our marriage license, copies of old bank documents, and the prenuptial agreement Lydia and I had signed before the wedding. At the time, it had felt like a formality. Her parents' idea. I had almost been offended, but had agreed to make them feel better. I found the key in the little dish where I kept spare screws and washers. The lock turned with a stiff click. I lifted the lid and saw the stack of papers inside, yellowing slightly at the edges. On top was our marriage license. Under that, our simple will from years ago. Under that, a blue folder with our names on it and the word prenup, written in careful letters by the lawyer who had drawn it up. I pulled the blue folder out and set it on the workbench. I did not open it yet. I just looked at it. My name on the front. Lydia's name under it. It felt like staring at a map from a trip I had taken without ever looking at the roads. In that moment, a face came to mind. Daniel, an old friend from college. Back then, he had been the only person in our friend group who actually enjoyed reading legal texts. He had gone on to become a family lawyer in the city. We had lost touch for a while, then reconnected through social media a few years ago. Every time Lydia's family mentioned the prenup, they always said, her parents' lawyer. But I remembered asking Daniel to look at it before I signed anything. I remembered him saying he would do it as a favor. Back then, I had been in love and impatient. I had skimmed the parts Daniel tried to explain and just signed. Today, I felt very different. I wiped my hands on a rag and pulled my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over his contact. I thought about who they believed I was. The soft one, the understanding one. The man who would accept an apology and walk away with no questions asked. Then I pressed call. The phone rang a few times. For a second, I wondered if he would answer, if he would even remember me. Then his voice came through, surprised but warm. He asked how I was doing, said it had been a long time, asked what he could do for me. I told him I needed to talk about an old document he had once looked at for me. I told him it was important. I kept my tone steady. I did not give details. He listened, then said he remembered the situation more than I probably thought. He said he had free time on Monday if I could come by his office. He told me to bring every piece of paper I had. We hung up. I looked back at the blue folder on the workbench. I still had no idea what exactly was inside that would help me. I only knew two things for sure now. 1, Lydia and her family had already written me out of their story. 2, they were certain I would let them do it. My hand rested on the folder for a long moment. Then I opened a drawer under the workbench and took out a small sticky note and a pen. On the note, in simple letters, I wrote one word: prenup. I stuck it to the front of the folder as if I were labeling it for some future project. In a way, I was. I placed the folder carefully back into the metal box, closed the lid, and locked it again. This time, though, I kept the key in my pocket. The switch inside me had flipped. I was still calm. I was still quiet. But I was done being the person they could walk over in the name of peace. On Monday morning, I woke up with a strange kind of focus. The pain was still there, but it had settled into something solid and cold inside my chest. It felt like the part of me that had always wanted to keep the peace had finally sat down and gone quiet. Another part, one I did not know very well, had stood up to take its place. I put the blue folder in a plain backpack, along with the locked metal box and a notebook. I dressed like I would for work, simple shirt and slacks, and told my manager by email that I had an appointment in the city. No one asked questions. At the office, I was the guy who never made trouble. The drive downtown felt different this time. I noticed details I usually ignored. The same faded billboard, the same cracked lane markers. I realized that while my personal life had shifted overnight, the rest of the city moved exactly as before. It made my own situation feel both small and very sharp. Daniel's office was on the 5th floor of an older building with clean glass doors and quiet hallways. I remembered the address from years ago, from when he had first started his practice and had been proud to put his name on a door. Back then, I had come with flowers from Lydia for his opening. Today, I came with a backpack that felt heavier than it should. The receptionist greeted me and told me he would be a few minutes. I sat on a soft chair and watched people walk past, each holding folders, each with their own quiet problems. No one knew that the man sitting with a backpack in his lap had watched his wife get engaged to someone else on a bar TV. When Daniel called my name, his voice was friendly and surprised. He looked a little older than the last time I had seen him in person, more gray at the temples, deeper lines near his eyes, but his expression was the same, calm, sharp, always reading more than people said out loud. We sat in his office, the door closed behind us. Shelves of legal books lined one wall. A framed degree hung behind his desk. In the window, the city looked smaller, like a map. I told him, in simple words, what had happened over the weekend. I described the boring family reunion that had turned into an engagement party. I told him about the live stream, the caption, the way my name had been used as a line in someone's speech. I told him I had found the blue folder. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I just said what was true. He listened without interrupting much. He only asked a few short questions to get dates and names straight. I could see the moment when he understood that the public humiliation and the private planning had not been accidents. His jaw tightened slightly. He told me that this was bad, but in a way that could be useful for me if I wanted it to be. I took the blue folder out and set it on his desk. I also placed the metal box beside it and opened it so he could see there were more documents. He smiled a little and said he remembered telling me long ago to keep everything together. He was glad I had listened to at least that. He opened the folder and started to read. For a while the room was quiet, except for the soft sound of pages moving. Sometimes he circled a line with his pen, sometimes he put a small sticky tab on a section. I watched his face instead of the words. At first his expression was neutral. Slowly, though, his eyebrows rose. Once, he even let out a low sound that was almost a laugh, but without humor. When he finished the last page of the prenup, he leaned back and looked at me. He asked if I had ever really read it. I admitted that I had skimmed it at best, that I had trusted him and Lydia's parents and had been eager to sign so the wedding could move forward. He nodded like he had expected that answer. He did not list the clauses out loud. He only told me, in a calm voice, that the agreement was not what Lydia's family thought it was. He said that some things they had insisted on for their own protection also worked to protect me, especially with the way they were now acting in public. He reminded me that he had made some changes to the original draft all those years ago. At the time, he had warned me that I might need them one day, even though I had laughed it off. He then shifted to what I needed to do next. He suggested I start collecting everything. Screenshots of social media posts, copies of the live stream if possible, the messages I had seen between Lydia and Evan, the family group chat comments that treated our marriage as already gone. He told me that the combination of the contract, the proof of adultery, and the public humiliation gave me a stronger position than they realized. He spoke in terms of options. I could let things slide and simply accept whatever Lydia and her family suggested later, or I could choose to use what was already on paper and file first, on my own terms. He did not push me either way. He only said that if I decided to act, timing would matter. I told him I was tired of being the last to know things about my own life. I said I did not want revenge in the way people imagine it online. I wanted fairness. I wanted my name taken off their jokes and put back on the things I had actually worked for. I wanted to stop being the soft place they all assumed would catch them when they fell. Daniel nodded. He said that was a reasonable goal. He said he would draft the first set of documents just in case and send me a summary by email. He told me to think about how far I wanted to go and to keep my actions quiet for now. He repeated that last part. Quiet. When I left his office, I felt strange. I was still the same person. I still hated shouting and big scenes. But now I was holding knowledge instead of only emotions. It felt different. From there, I went straight to the bank. The branch manager knew me by name. We had spoken years ago when I had opened our joint account after the wedding. Today I asked to speak with someone in a private office. I said I wanted to adjust some arrangements. The banker, a man in his 50s with a soft voice, listened while I explained that I needed a separate personal account and a few changes to my direct deposit. I did not talk about the engagement or the betrayal. I only said that I wanted clearer lines between my own income and shared expenses. He did not ask why. He had probably heard many versions of the real reason before. We opened a new account in my name only. I asked him to move my salary direct deposit over as soon as possible. I requested printed statements for the past year of the joint account. While he clicked through the system, I stared at the screen when he turned it toward me. There were hotel charges in Denver on weekends when Lydia had told me she was visiting family but staying at her aunt's place. There were large restaurant bills for 2, sometimes 3 people, with notes in the descriptions that hinted at fine dining. There were cash withdrawals right before her work trips. None of it shocked me exactly. It just laid out in numbers what I had already seen in pictures. The banker printed the statements and slipped them into a thick envelope. I thanked him and carried it out like it was something fragile. At work the next day, the story from the Denver party had started to spread online. My coworkers passed around a link to a gossip blog that had picked it up. The headline called it a romantic reunion between a successful surgeon and his once-lost love. They all laughed at the mention of a previous marriage that was described as short-lived and quiet. No name was given for the husband, just a few lines about a man who had not been a good match. Jason glanced at me and looked uncomfortable. I could tell he had put the pieces together. He did not say anything, and neither did I. I simply put on my headphones and did my work. But inside, each careless comment glued another piece of my decision in place. In the evenings, I sat at my small desk in the garage. I used my own laptop, not the work one. I backed up everything. I saved Aunt Carol's posts, the live stream recording that someone had mirrored, the engagement photos, the captions, even the likes and comments. I exported the family group chat and kept a copy of the messages that talked about fixing mistakes and first marriages. I took careful screenshots of Lydia's messages with Evan before I closed her tablet and placed it back where I had found it. I did not change anything on her side. I only copied what was already there. It felt almost mechanical. Click, save, label. I named the folders with dates. It was the kind of methodical work I did at my job. Only this time, my own life was the project. Later that week, Lydia's parents invited me to dinner. The message came from Nora. She wrote that it would be good to talk about the future and that she knew things had been confusing. She added a line about hoping we could keep things civilized. That word sat wrong in my throat. I went anyway. Part of me wanted to see their faces. Part of me wanted to watch how they behaved when they thought they were managing me. Their house looked the same as always, large, well-decorated, full of framed photos. Now I noticed something I had only half seen before. Most of the photos that included me were older. The newer ones showed Lydia more, with family, with colleagues, and now with Evan. A few frames had been replaced entirely. We sat at the dining table. Nora had cooked too much food, like she always did. Victor poured himself a glass of wine and started to talk about how life sometimes moved in ways that were painful but necessary. He spoke as if he were narrating a movie. He said Lydia was finding her true path. He said he hoped I would not be bitter and that I would sign whatever needed to be signed when the time came so she could move on cleanly. He did not say this kindly. He said it like a business owner talking about closing a branch that had underperformed. I listened. I chewed my food. I answered simple questions about work. When they talked about the engagement party, they acted as if I had seen nothing. Nora tried to soften things by saying that everyone was just excited and a little clumsy with their words. She said she was sure Lydia would explain everything soon, that I did not need to rush into any decisions. I noticed how they spoke as though the main work was already done. In their minds, Lydia's future with Evan was real and solid. My part was to step aside in a calm, polite way, handing over my life like a set of keys. Toward the end of dinner, Victor made a short toast. He raised his glass and said that he believed in owning your story and standing with the family you belong to. He did not look at me when he said it. My phone, face down next to my plate, buzzed softly. I let it vibrate again before I excused myself to the bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door and checked the screen. It was an email from Daniel. The subject line was simple: next steps and timeline. The message body was calm and clear. He had attached a brief summary of my legal position, an outline of possible filings, and a note about how public behavior could affect the outcome. At the end, he had written that if I wanted to move forward, it would be best to act before the engagement celebration weekend finished. He added one sentence that stayed with me. He said that acting first would mean I was not just reacting to their story, but writing my own. I returned to the table, finished my meal, and thanked them for dinner. I did not argue. I did not announce anything. As I walked toward the door, Nora touched my arm lightly and told me she hoped I would be reasonable when things became official. I simply nodded and told her I understood. Outside, the air was cooler. The house glowed behind me, full of warm light and soft conversation. I walked down the driveway toward my car. Just as I reached for the door handle, my phone rang. Daniel's name was on the screen. I answered. His voice was steady. He said he had seen my read receipt on the email and wanted to be sure I understood the timing. He told me very clearly that if I chose to proceed, he could have everything ready to file and serve by the night of that Denver engagement party. I stood there in the dark with the phone to my ear, staring at the bright windows of my in-laws' house, and listened to him describe how, with the right timing, their perfect story could collide with the reality they had tried to hide. The decision I had been walking around all week suddenly stood right in front of me. I drove home from Lydia's parents' house with Daniel's words repeating in my head. He had said that if I wanted to move first, everything could be ready by the night of the engagement celebration. He had said that timing would matter because they were using the party to rewrite history in public. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same as always. The front light glowed softly. The shrubs needed trimming, It could have been any normal evening. Inside, the air smelled like the candles Lydia liked to burn. For a moment, I stood in the entryway and just listened to the quiet. My ears still rang with Victor's toast about the family you belong to. In the garage, I sat on the small stool by my workbench and opened Daniel's email again. I read his summary more carefully this time. The words were simple, but the meaning hit hard. He explained that the prenup, as he had revised it years ago, gave me strong protection over the house and my personal savings, especially in cases of adultery. He noted that Lydia's public engagement, while still married, and the social media posts calling our marriage a mistake, would help my position if I filed first. He listed the documents he would prepare: a divorce petition, notices regarding property, and formal letters about my financial ties to Victor's agency. At the end, he repeated that he would only move if I clearly told him to. He wrote that I had every right to protect myself. He reminded me that staying silent was also a decision, just a different kind. I put the phone down on the workbench and stared at the grain of the wood. I tried to imagine two futures. In one, I waited for Lydia to come home, listened to her speech about love and second chances, and agreed to whatever she and her parents had already planned. In the other, I acted before she could stand in front of me with her prepared lines. I chose not to be the last to know this time. The second path felt less like revenge and more like finally standing up in my own life. I picked up the phone again and sent Daniel a short reply. I told him that I wanted to proceed. I wrote that I wanted him to prepare whatever was necessary so we could file before the engagement weekend ended. My message was only a few sentences long, but when I pressed send, something inside me settled. The next morning, Daniel called to confirm he had received my decision. He said he would start drafting immediately and asked me to come in midweek to review and sign. He reminded me to keep collecting anything relevant. He stressed again that I should not confront Lydia or her family before the papers were filed and served. He said calm, quiet, and documented would be my 3 best tools. So that is what I focused on. At work, I did my usual tasks. Behind that routine, my mind stayed on a different track. On my breaks, I organized files on my laptop and double-checked that everything backed up properly to an external drive. I created simple folders: social media, messages, bank, prenup. It felt like building a small, neat wall between my life and their story. In the evenings, I moved through our house in a new way. I took photos of each room, not because I was sentimental, but because Daniel had said it would help to have a record of the state of things now. I reached into closets and drawers and quietly sorted my personal items from shared ones. Important documents went into one box. Things that were clearly hers, I left exactly where they were. One night, I stood in our bedroom and looked at our wedding photo on the dresser. Lydia's dress in that picture was simple, nothing like the gown she had worn on the rooftop. My suit was slightly too big, but my smile had been real. I picked up the frame and turned it over. On the back, in her handwriting, she had once written, "Our real happy beginning." I set the frame back down and realized that for her, that line had probably become a joke. For me, it had been true at the time. I decided that I would not let those 10 years be rewritten as some mistake I should be ashamed of. I had been a good husband. That mattered to me, even if it did not matter to them. Midweek, I went back to Daniel's office. He had a neat stack of papers ready on his desk. He went through them with me section by section, not rushing, explaining in plain language. He showed me the petition to dissolve the marriage, filed on grounds that matched what we had already seen online and in messages. He explained how the prenup protected my ownership of the house and how Lydia's actions meant she would not be able to claim what her family thought she could. He pointed to the part where her public engagement while still married was noted, backed by the attached posts and photos. Then he showed me the letters related to Victor's agency. He reminded me of the contract I had once signed when I gave him that large sum of money. The document had given me a quiet share in the company. Daniel had included a formal notice that I would no longer act as a guarantor for their loans and that any use of my share as collateral without my consent would be challenged. I listened, asked a few questions, then picked up the pen. Signing my name that many times felt strange at first. Halfway through, it started to feel like I was finally writing myself back into my own story. Daniel told me that he would file the main documents with the court on Friday morning. He said he had arranged for a process server in Denver to be ready by Saturday night, when the big engagement celebration was scheduled to peak. He said he had spoken with a professional who knew how to enter a public event quietly and do the job discreetly but clearly. He asked me one last time if I was sure. I told him yes. I said I was tired of being treated like a temporary background character in their lives. He nodded and told me that from now on, I should expect noise from their side once they received the papers. He advised me not to respond immediately to any angry messages, but to route everything through him. He said that until Saturday night, My only job was to stay calm and not change my behavior in a way that would alert them. So I did. On Friday morning, Daniel texted me a short note saying that the filings were accepted and stamped by the court. He attached a photo of the stamped first page, with the date clearly visible. Seeing that mark made everything feel real in a new way. It was no longer just talk and planning. It was part of the record now. That same day, Lydia called. Her number lit up my phone in the kitchen while I was making coffee. When I answered, she sounded bright and slightly rushed. She told me that Aunt Carol had planned another small family thing in Denver for the weekend and that she would drive up early Saturday. She said they needed her help with some details. She did not say the word engagement. She spoke like everything between us was normal. She complained lightly about traffic and about her aunt's high standards. She told me I should relax, watch the game, maybe go out with Jason again. She said she would be back on Sunday or Monday, depending on how things went. I listened. I answered in short, calm phrases. I did not ask questions. I did not mention the documents. When she thanked me for being so understanding, I made a simple sound of agreement. It was a role I had played for years. For once, I was playing it on purpose. On Saturday morning, she moved around the house like she always did before a trip. She checked her bags, her makeup, her clothes. I helped carry her suitcase to the car again. The garment bag lay across the back seat, zipped up. This time, I did not ask what was inside. I already knew the type of gown she had picked. She kissed my cheek and told me we would talk properly when she got back, as if the big conversation was her gift to me. She said she did not want me to worry, that everything would make sense soon. I answered that I was sure it would. I watched her drive away. The car turned the corner and disappeared. I did not wave. I stood there until the street was empty, then went back inside. The rest of the day passed slowly. I cleaned the kitchen, folded some laundry, took out the trash. Simple tasks done carefully. From time to time, my phone would light up with new posts from the engagement weekend. I did not open them right away. I left them in their little icons, waiting. In the afternoon, I went to the garage and checked the small box on the shelf where I had placed my most important personal items: passport, birth certificate, backup drive, some cash. It was a strange feeling, knowing that no matter what noise came from their side later, my foundation was already steady under my feet. As the sun began to set, I opened my laptop on the workbench and logged into my accounts one more time. I made sure my new bank arrangement was in place. I checked that all my backups had synced. I confirmed that the folder of evidence was complete and shared in a secure way with Daniel. Then I opened the extended family group chat on the screen. The feed was full of color and excitement. There were photos from the rooftop hotel in Denver, shots of the ballroom being decorated, short clips of music tests, and people rehearsing toasts. Lydia appeared in some of them in casual clothes, laughing with cousins, holding a clipboard like she was part of the planning committee instead of the main event. No one mentioned me anywhere. My phone vibrated with a new message from an unknown Denver number. Daniel had told me the process server would contact me directly when they were in place. I opened the text. The person wrote that they had arrived at the hotel, had picked up the envelope from the local office, and were waiting near the ballroom entrance. They said the formal papers were ready to be handed over the moment my wife was clearly present at the party. They asked me to confirm that I wanted them to serve her tonight during the event and not later at her home. I read the question twice. Then I typed back that yes, tonight was correct. I placed my phone on the desk next to the laptop. On the wall above, a small clock ticked. It was early evening. The party in Denver would be starting soon. I reached for the framed wedding photo on the side shelf and brought it to the workbench. I took off my ring and placed it flat next to the frame. I opened the folder on my laptop that held the scanned first page of the court filing, the one with the stamped date. I arranged them so that if I took a picture, all three elements would be in it: the photo of our beginning, the ring from our middle, and the paper that marked the end. For a while, I just sat there, looking at the arrangement. I did not feel joy. I did not feel chaos. I felt clear. My phone buzzed again. It was another message from the same unknown number in Denver. The process server wrote that they were close to the ballroom door now, and that the speeches were about to begin. They said Lydia was entering the room and that she was walking toward the stage. My phone buzzed again. The process server told me Lydia was on the stage now, the lights were on her, and people were moving closer with their phones held up. They said it looked like the main speeches were about to start. I opened Aunt Carol's live stream from the rooftop ballroom on my laptop. The picture was clear. The room glowed with warm lights and gold decorations. Lydia stood in the center in her gown, hair perfect, her hand resting on Evan's arm. Behind them, the big screen showed their names together with some fancy script about love and second chances. Guests were packed around the stage. I recognized Lydia's parents in the front, both of them smiling proudly. Carol walked around with her phone held high, talking into it. She told the viewers this was the happiest night of their lives, that Lydia was finally where she belonged, that love had fixed an old mistake. I heard the crowd cheer. While I watched, Daniel called. I answered and left the live stream playing without sound. He asked if I was still sure about going through with it tonight. I told him yes. My voice sounded steady even to me. He then went over the important points one last time. He reminded me that the prenup put the house in my control, especially after Lydia's public cheating. He reminded me that the papers he had filed meant she was being served as a spouse already in a legal divorce, not as someone who was just thinking about leaving. He also mentioned the formal letters to Victor's agency, the ones in the envelope that would cut off any use of my money as their safety net. He told me that once the papers were in Lydia's hands, things would move fast. There would be panic, calls, and likely a lot of anger. He advised me to answer nothing tonight, to let the documents speak first. I listened, thanked him, and ended the call. On the screen, someone passed Lydia a microphone. She laughed and said a few words to the guests. I could not hear them, but I did not need to. The expressions were enough. Lydia looked like someone standing at the center of a story she believed she controlled. I lowered my eyes to the workbench. The framed wedding photo, my ring, and the scanned page with the court stamp lay in front of me. I picked up my phone, framed them in the camera, and took one clear picture. Then I opened the extended family group chat. The last message there was a short video of Lydia and Evan walking into the ballroom. Everyone had reacted with hearts and clapping emojis. I tapped the attach icon, selected the photo I had just taken, and wrote one short line under it. I did not write insults. I did not explain the whole situation. I simply wrote that as of today, Lydia was still my wife under the law, that divorce papers had been filed, and that all relevant documents were in motion. I added that anyone who had questions could speak to my lawyer. Then I sent the message. For a moment, nothing happened. The photo sat there in the chat, small and quiet. My ring on the paper, our wedding picture beside the court stamp. Then the indicators started to show that people were seeing it. One by one, their icons moved under the image. At the same time, the live stream on my laptop flickered a little. Phones in the crowd began lighting up as people saw new notifications. I watched a wave move through the guests. Faces changed, smiles froze. A few people lowered their glasses and stared down at their screens. Mia appeared near the edge of the frame, holding her phone, eyes wide. Her gaze went from her screen to Lydia on the stage. She looked stunned. Lydia's smile faltered. Someone behind her stepped forward and showed her their phone. She glanced at it, then grabbed her own from a nearby table. I could see the exact moment she opened the family chat. Her face tightened, the color draining slightly. Evan leaned in to ask what was wrong. She turned the screen toward him. He read the message, saw the picture with the stamped page and the ring on top, and his jaw clenched. He looked out over the guests as if searching for who had done this to their perfect scene. In the middle of that confusion, a man in a suit moved through the crowd, the process server. He walked up to the edge of the stage, kept his voice low but firm, and addressed Lydia by her full married name. I could not hear his exact words through the stream, but I knew the script. He identified himself and placed a thick envelope into her hand in front of everyone. The room around them fell almost silent. Some guests pulled back, others stared openly. Victor took a step forward, face dark, reaching as if he wanted to snatch the envelope away. Nora looked frozen, her hand over her mouth. Carol kept her phone up by habit, then seemed to realize what she was capturing and dropped it slightly. The envelope in Lydia's hand was plain and heavy. Inside were the filed divorce petition, copies of the prenup clauses that protected my assets, and the formal notices to her father's agency. Everything they had assumed would be quiet and private now sat in her grip, in the middle of their shining moment. The live stream glitched and cut off a second later. The screen on my laptop went dark. My phone started to buzz almost immediately with incoming calls and messages. Lydia's name flashed, then her mother's, then Victor's, then unknown numbers. All of them stacked on top of the family chat, where my one photo still sat under a line about today's filings. I let the phone vibrate on the workbench. I picked up my ring, placed it on top of the physical court receipt beside the laptop, and then closed the laptop slowly, leaving their noise on the other side of a blank, dark screen.